Before we continue, understand this podcast is for adults only and refers to relationships and activities between adults which are voluntary and consensual. If you or anyone you know is being abused, coerced, or violently aggressed against, please reach out for help to the appropriate authorities. Gorean Voice, Episode 4, Tribe, Community, Identity, and Acceptance as a Virtue or a Vice. Thanks for tuning in again. This week we're having a look at tribes. Throughout this episode, I'll be sharing some ideas I've read, some ideas I've listened to, and some ideas I've lived. Of course, very little of what I have to say here is original, but this is especially true for this episode. As such, please credit better men than I, such as Jordan Peterson, Stefan Molyneux, Tim Ferriss, Jack Donovan, and Sebastian Junger, with any wisdom you might hear while you listen, and credit me only with the mistakes. So let's take a little detour, courtesy of one of my favorite contemporary authors. He wrote The Perfect Storm, a true story of men against the sea, which was turned into a major Hollywood motion picture starring Mark Wahlberg and George Clooney. Tribe, On Homecoming and Belonging, is a book by Sebastian Junger, first published in 2016. In it, Junger explores the importance of belonging to a close-knit community and how this sense of belonging affects human behavior, mental health, and societal cohesion. Drawing from history, psychology, and anthropology, as well as his own experience, Junger argues that modern society, with its emphasis on individualism and technological isolation, often lacks the deep sense of community that humans need to thrive. Junger uses examples from Native American tribal societies, military units in combat, and disaster-struck communities to illustrate how crises can create a temporary sense of communal purpose and belonging. He suggests that in such situations, people often come together in ways that are deeply satisfying and psychologically beneficial, highlighting a contrast with the more isolated and less cohesive nature of everyday modern life. A little aside about disaster-struck communities from a Gorean perspective. In both speculative fiction about disasters and genuine accounts of the same, there is an astonishing rapidness in the reversion to the classical sex roles. Women start cooking and cleaning, men start building things and establishing perimeters, and our souls step back a few centuries. This is certainly part of the allure of camping. Why spend money on equipment and burn gas to get there, take all the time away from our comfortable houses to go and sleep in a tent, hammock, or trailer? Because we like to take the time to get back to how things were, and there is a beauty that is found only in the rough. Of course, I suspect that people who actually lived that way would happily try out running water and central heating, but let's not oversell our way of life. I spent plenty of time with tribal people who think that adopting modernity wholesale is a quaint idea. This may be why Gorean Survivalists and Preppers is one of the most active Gorean groups on FetLife.com. Back to Junger, though. The book critically examines the challenges faced by veterans returning from combat, struggling to reintegrate into a society that lacks the solidarity and shared purpose of the military. Junger suggests that this difficulty in reintegration can contribute to the high rates of post-traumatic stress disorder among veterans, arguing that the lack of community support exacerbates their condition. Tribe is a thought-provoking examination of human nature and societal structures, calling for a re-evaluation of what it means to live in a community. Junger advocates for a greater understanding and fostering of the bonds that tie people together, suggesting that a sense of belonging is crucial for mental health and societal well-being. Implementing the wisdom from Sebastian Junger's tribe into one's life involves fostering deeper connections with others and creating a sense of community in both personal and broader contexts. You can strengthen social bonds by making a concerted effort to build stronger relationships with family, friends, and neighbors. This can be through regular gatherings, shared meals, or simply spending more time together in meaningful activities. You can engage in community service and volunteering for local organizations or community projects, and this can connect you with others who share similar values and goals, fostering a sense of belonging and contributing to the common good. You can create support networks by establishing or joining groups based on shared experiences, interests, or challenges, such as veterans associations, hobby clubs, or support groups. These networks provide emotional support and a sense of solidarity. 4. Promoting shared experiences. You can engage in activities that require cooperation and teamwork, such as sports, music bands, or community theater. Shared experiences can create bonds and a sense of collective achievement. Simplify and focus on what matters. Reflect on the aspects of modern life that may be contributing to feelings of isolation or distraction. Consider simplifying your lifestyle to focus more on relationships and community rather than material success or digital connectivity. There is a particular element of this that I heard from a guest speaker in junior high school. This speaker was born without arms or hands. Many children suffered birth defects such as these in the early 60s due to the side effects of a drug called thalidomide. This speaker shared his adversity, his talent for snare drumming, recounted some of his more memorable experiences, but among the bits that stayed with me was this one, which I'll never forget. He said, "Someone born with arms can choose from 10 million different things to do with his life. I can only choose from about 10,000, but life is only long enough to do about a dozen things well." I'll always remember these words, especially during times when I was stuck in something. There was a time in my life where I was quite literally stuck in a certain job, and it would have been a crime for me to leave, even though being so subject to impose limitations on the full spectrum of human endeavor, which would otherwise be open to me. Within that paradigm, I chose to pursue excellence. In my case, such a pursuit was rewarded with an interesting few years. I have always recommended to women, especially those who voluntarily find themselves in slavery, to keep this in view. A free woman has many hundreds of more options open to her than a Kajira. That is true. But a good life can be lived bound and fettered, since life is only long enough to do a few things well. In 1,000 years, the women who wear steel, serve men, bear children, and keep house will be dust, as will the boss girls and the CEOs. To continue with Junger's list, though, practicing active listening, that it will foster deeper connections by being genuinely interested in others' lives, thoughts, and feelings. It can help build trust and strengthen relationships. Please remember that different people have different sharing styles and different listening styles. Exceptionally clever Kajira know how to tune into these styles, and wise men know how to meet people where they are and adjust their own expectations accordingly. Now, Junger also advocates for communal spaces, support or initiate efforts to create or improve public spaces that encourage community interaction, such as parks, community gardens, or rec centers. Every good group does this. My firing range does community cleanup, salmon spawning ground stewardship, and engages other users of the same mountain where the firing range is located. This not only helps build human connection, but has the added benefit of positive public relations for an activity and facility that is frequently maligned. Junger also encourages us to celebrate community traditions, participate in or help organize local festivals, ceremonies, or traditions. These events can strengthen communal ties and provide a sense of belonging and identity. It can also educate others. Sharing the insights from tribe with others through discussions, book clubs, or social media can spread awareness, which can inspire collective action towards building more cohesive communities. And most importantly, is to lead by example, being a role model for community engagement and support. Your actions can inspire others to contribute to their communities, creating a ripple effect that enhances communal bonds. Though I'm not myself a religious person, I do feel a great admiration for the tradition of ministry that male householders engage in. If one's life is well sorted out, such a man has a duty to mentor, tutor, and otherwise lead the younger men in the community by example. Implementing these steps can help individuals create a sense of belonging and community in their lives, reflecting the core message of tribe, that human well-being is deeply connected to social bonds and communal support. Now let's look at another contemporary author. The Way of Men by Jack Donovan is a book that delves into the author's perspective on what constitutes authentic masculinity. Donovan posits that true masculinity is defined by what he terms the tactical virtues: strength, courage, mastery, and honor. These virtues, according to Donovan, have been essential across different cultures and historical periods for men to survive and thrive within their groups. He argues that these virtues are innate to men's nature and are what historically make them effective protectors and providers in the face of external threats and challenges. Donovan critiques modern society for drifting away from these core masculine virtues due to technological advancements, societal changes, and the absence of clear external threats. He believes this drift has led to a crisis in male identity, with men feeling alienated and unsure about their role in contemporary society. The book suggests that the absence of a clear pathway for men to express their masculinity in positive and socially constructive ways contributes to this identity crisis. The Way of Men is both a call to return to these fundamental virtues and a critique of how modern societal norms have, in Donovan's view, diluted the essence of what it means to be a man. He encourages men to rediscover and embrace these virtues to regain a sense of purpose and identity. It's important to note that Donovan's views and the book have been subject to criticism and controversy. However, from my perspective, I'm going to agree with Jack Donovan that I don't really want to hear about masculinity from somebody who I would not personally describe as masculine, and Donovan certainly is that. The Way of Men has sparked significant discussion about masculinity, its role in modern society, and how men can navigate their identities in an ever-changing world. Jack Donovan's advocacy for tribalism is rooted in his critique of modern society, which he sees as overly individualistic, disconnected, and lacking in meaningful communal bonds. His arguments in favor of tribalism are woven throughout his writings, particularly in books like The Way of Men and Becoming a Barbarian. Here's a summary of his main arguments in favor of tribalism. Return to primal virtues. Donovan argues that tribal societies are more likely to value and uphold the primary virtues he associates with true masculinity, the aforementioned strength, courage, mastery, and honor. He believes these virtues are best expressed and validated within the context of a close-knit group or tribe, where men can directly contribute to the welfare and protection of their community. I'm sure my fellow humans can share in the following sentiment. I may donate some money to some cause, or worse, be taxed by royal decree to support some alleged social good. This alleged social good may be just down the street, but for all I know, it could take place on another planet. I've calculated that I, quote, share nearly half of my income in this way. Even though this dollar amount is sizable, the contributions I make that I actually feel, that are actually salient to my lived experience, are the small things I do for the people who are close to me. Sometimes this means family, close friends, or associates of mine that I know through various communities. Sometimes it's merely neighbors, the people that I just happen to live near. Should I care more about them than I do about some poor soul on the far side of the world? Television commercials with Hollywood actors tell me I should care as much about the people far from me as those near to me. I was tempted, as a much younger man, to try and override this accident of birth and to care just as much for the orphans of Pakistan, the oppressed subjects of Latveria, the perpetually famished people of Molvania, or the freezing populace of totalitarian North Silesia. Why was I so tempted? It's hard to say. The brotherhood of mankind is a fascinating construct, but in the ensuing few decades, I've become much more active locally and a little more cynical. I think reaching out across the globe is a fine idea after one's life is well regulated locally, but I regularly witness people loudly proclaiming their support for some far-off cause that they are A, wholly ignorant of, and B, don't contribute anything to materially. You support such and such country defending itself from such and such other country, do you? How much of your own money have you donated to that cause? How many of your sons are in the infantry, shipping over there to stand between the good guys and the bad guys? Can you even point to that country on a map? It's the men and women who quietly man the food banks, or who silently clean up litter in their local park, that have my respect. Something tells me the folks who support big, far-flung causes are neglecting something rather closer to home. Consider an extreme example. Many of my male friends are fathers as well, and our children play together. Well, I would expect that they would exert every reasonable effort to protect my children if they were at risk. It would be unreasonable for me to expect them to exert themselves equally strenuously for my children as for their own, and I would regard them as a psychopath if they treated risk to their own children, my children, their more distant acquaintances, and the children on the far side of the world with equal concern. Back to Donovan, though. He also critiques modern alienation. Modern society has this problem of creating a sense of alienation and disconnection among individuals. He sees tribalism as a remedy to this, offering a framework for belonging and identity through more intimate and meaningful connections with others who share similar values and goals. Empowerment through loyalty and solidarity. Donovan emphasizes the empowerment that comes from loyalty and solidarity within a tribe. He suggests that in a tribal setting, individuals are more committed to each other's welfare, leading to stronger support networks and a sense of purpose that is often lacking in broader, impersonal societies. Rejection of consumerism and the empire of nothing. He likes to use the term empire of nothing to disparage modern consumer culture, where relationships are transactional and values are superficial. Donovan posits that tribalism offers an escape from this, encouraging a focus on real, tangible achievements and relationships rather than material accumulation. Survival and self-reliance. Of course, Donovan argues that tribalism fosters a spirit of survival and self-reliance, with members working together to overcome challenges. This contrasts with what he views as the dependency and entitlement encouraged by modern welfare states and global capitalism. Creation of meaningful societal structures. Finally, Donovan believes that tribalism allows for the creation of societal structures that are more meaningful, coherent, and aligned with human nature. He suggests that tribes can form the basis of societies that truly reflect the values and needs of their members, rather than imposing a one-size-fits-all solution on everyone. Donovan's arguments for tribalism are rooted in a desire to return to what he sees as a more authentic, virtuous, and fulfilling way of life. However, it's important to recognize that he has things to say about the trade-off between tribalism and a more widely integrated society. For instance, he has mentioned in his talks that despite being a great admirer of tribal societies, he's not keen to move and live full-time in such a setting. He cautions against the fantasy that many young men develop that they will move their cute little wife and adorable children out to the boonies, away from this modern mess, and chop wood for a living. Modernity has much to recommend it. I think his central theme, with respect to tribalism, is to find a way to integrate that into one's life on a human scale. As the options for interconnectivity increase in both scope and reach, it might be wise to limit one's participation in the global endeavor and focus 99% of one's social attention on building and maintaining friendships with those near at hand. I think a measured approach to living a tribal life is an essential part of being a healthy man. I think it can be done without you and your dozen closest friends moving to the woods and spending hours chanting in ancient Norse. It's a little bit like a diet and exercise lifestyle. We can, with thoughtful meal timing, a solid exercise program, and well-timed sleeping cycles, bring our bodies into a state of health that is exceptional compared to what most modern people enjoy, but was the norm for our hunter-gatherer ancestors. We can even use all sorts of modern gadgets and instruments to assist us in this endeavor. To live a modern tribal lifestyle, we're attempting to do the same thing for our mental health. Consider one of my favorite ideas in the book, The 4-Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss. This concept is called the low information diet. It's a deliberate choice to limit the amount of information one consumes, particularly from news media, social media, and other digital sources. In the book, he argues that consuming too much information can be unproductive and mentally taxing, leading to information overload, stress, and decision fatigue. The goal of a low information diet is not to become uninformed, but to reduce unnecessary information intake that doesn't contribute positively to one's life or goals. Here are some key aspects of a low information diet. Selective consumption. Instead of trying to keep up with a constant stream of news and updates, individuals on a low information diet are highly selective about the sources and types of information they engage with. They prioritize quality over quantity and relevance to their personal and professional lives. 2. Limiting news intake. One common recommendation is to significantly reduce or even eliminate daily news consumption, especially from sources that tend to sensationalize information or focus on negative events. The idea is that most news is not immediately actionable or relevant to one's day-to-day life. 3. Minimizing social media. Reducing time spent on social media platforms is another key component, as these can be major sources of distraction and often contribute to information overload. People might choose specific times to check social media or limit their use to certain platforms that they find genuinely useful or enriching. Now here's another one, more for the geeks in the crowd, called batch processing. Instead of constantly checking emails, messages, or other news updates throughout the day, someone on a low-information diet might set specific times for these activities. This approach helps to reduce distractions and improve focus and productivity. Focus on creation over consumption. By consuming less information, individuals have more time and mental energy to focus on generative, creative pursuits, problem solving, and other productive activities. This shift from consumption to creation can lead to greater personal satisfaction and achievement. Seeking depth. When consuming information, the emphasis is on depth rather than breadth. This might mean reading books or in-depth articles on topics of interest or relevance rather than skimming headlines or jumping from topic to topic. The low information diet is a great strategy for managing attention and focus in an age of information abundance. It's based on the understanding that not all information is of equal value, and our time and mental resources are limited and should be allocated wisely. I think a useful analog for this concept is food. For much of our existence, we didn't get enough food. We spent most of our time looking for food. Any big chunk of something sweet, like honey or berries, was a huge bonus. Today, of course, we can eat ourselves to death in a matter of weeks if we so choose, and it hardly costs us a thing. The same thing is with information. We used to have to spend a lot more time gathering relevant information, which can now essentially be beamed into the palm of our hand thanks to smartphones. From a Gorean perspective, the low-information diet is especially useful for Kajirai, given that ideally they operate in a context defined by their owners. Ignoring or simply not taking in superfluous information can certainly help them stay focused. In a broader sense, consider which aspects of your life are currently suboptimal. Some aspect of your health, a neglected social dimension, certain financial things that you haven't seen to properly. How many of these aren't taken care of because you don't have enough information? I'd wager it's a very round figure indeed. Enhancing focus on core values. A low-information diet can help Goreans concentrate more on the core values and principles in their chosen way of life. By reducing the noise of irrelevant information, practitioners can devote more time and energy to understanding and living according to Gorean philosophy, studying the books, and engaging in community practices. It reduces distraction from external influences as well. The Gorean lifestyle requires a degree of immersion and commitment that can be diluted by the constant influx of external irrelevant information and mainstream cultural norms that may conflict with Gorean principles. Limiting exposure to such influences can help maintain the integrity of one's lifestyle choices and beliefs. Of course, you could be accused of setting up a cult or being overly parochial in this regard, so, your mileage may vary. Improved mental clarity and discipline. The practice of discipline is a key aspect of the Gorean lifestyle. A low-information diet inherently requires discipline to resist the temptation of incessant information consumption. This self-imposed discipline can reinforce the broader discipline required in the Gorean lifestyle, leading to improved mental clarity and focus. I'll tell you, for one, I take cold showers every day, and it's a lot easier for me to jump in a cold shower sometimes than it is for me to put that bloody phone down. More time for community and relationships. By spending less time consuming unnecessary information, individuals have more time to invest in building and maintaining the hierarchical relationships and community interactions that are central to the Gorean way of life. This can include participating in in-person discussions, or even online forums, attending events, or simply engaging more deeply with others in the lifestyle, preferably in person. Preservation of lifestyle integrity. The selective consumption of information allows individuals to carefully choose sources that align with or enrich their understanding and practice of the Gorean lifestyle. This is especially true given that the Gorean lifestyle is somewhat meant to be a retrogressive lifestyle that's not necessarily as technocratic as our own. This can help preserve the integrity of the lifestyle against dilution or misunderstanding by mainstream norms and values. Enhance personal development. Goreans often emphasize personal development, mastery, and the pursuit of excellence in various endeavors. A low-information diet frees up cognitive resources and time that can be redirected towards these pursuits, whether they be physical training, studying Gorean philosophy, or mastering skills relevant to the lifestyle. There are a couple of other authors I'd like to get a hand from today. One of them is Canadian philosopher Stefan Molyneux. He has authored several books and has a long-running philosophy podcast. One of his best works is something called Real-Time Relationships, The Logic of Love. He lays out specific techniques for communication that really help people own what their feelings are, rather than establishing an external locus of control for their own emotional states. Goreans can integrate Stefan Molyneux's concept of real-time relationships into their lives by focusing on the principles of honesty, communication, and self-knowledge within the context of their Gorean lifestyle. Here's a few ways one can do that. Honesty and transparency. Emphasize the importance of honesty in building meaningful relationships. For Goreans, that could mean being more transparent about their needs, desires, and expectations within the context of their role. Clear communication can help prevent misunderstanding and strengthen the trust and respect between individuals. Active listening. Implementing active listening and empathetic understanding can enhance the depth of Gorean relationships. By truly listening to and understanding each other's perspectives, Goreans can foster a deeper emotional connection and resolve conflicts more effectively. Self-knowledge. Molyneux's work encourages individuals to engage in self-reflection to better understand their motivations and emotional responses. For Goreans, this introspection can lead to a clearer understanding of their place within the Gorean hierarchy and how their personal values align with Gorean philosophy. It can also aid in identifying areas for personal growth and development. Direct communication. The core concept of real-time relationships suggests addressing issues and conflicts directly and promptly. In the Gorean context, this approach can help maintain the integrity of relationships and the social order. ensuring that conflicts are resolved in a manner consistent with Gorean principles of honor and respect. Building meaningful connections. Molyneux advocates for relationships based on genuine connection rather than superficial interactions. Goreans can apply this by fostering deep bonds within their community, prioritizing relationships that are meaningful and aligned with their values, and enhancing the communal aspects of Gorean life. Rational emotional understanding. By applying logic to understand emotions within relationships, Goreans can navigate the complex dynamics of their interactions more effectively. This rational approach to emotional understanding can help in managing the emotional intensity that might arise from power dynamics inherent in Gorean relationships. Real-time relationships can enrich the Gorean experience by fostering stronger, more meaningful connections. There is another Canadian who I'd like to draw from this morning. His name is Jordan Peterson, and though he has much to share on several topics, the thing I'd like to get into today is the very definition of identity and sanity. You see, there is an intuitive understanding that sanity is somehow related to how accurately the mind is perceiving the world outside the skull the mind is trapped in. That's certainly a part of it, but that's not enough, not by a long shot. First of all, the senses, even when they all agree, are unreliable witnesses as to what's going on outside the skull. So discerning reality must be a collaborative enterprise. Consider a scientist who is studying something with a carefully constructed and calibrated instrument. He looks at the display and it indicates something about the state of nature. Perhaps it might still be a good idea to have someone else look through that microscope as well and see if they see the same thing. I like Jordan Peterson's wider definition of sanity, though, that it is not merely perceiving the forensic truth, but being able to meaningfully communicate that to other people in his social group. Consider a genius who is far and away smarter than all those around him. He may be able to more accurately understand natural phenomena than all of his contemporaries. But if he is a shut-in with poor hygiene, who can't be bothered by the little people and their more immediate concerns of the upcoming solstice festival, or the songs which are to be sung at the church for the upcoming wedding, he will be perceived at best as arrogant and at worst as insane or possessed. He's less likely than an ordinary man to die surrounded by grandchildren, and all his genius, brilliance, and insight will die with him, as if it had never happened. Is that the sane thing to do? So sanity is something of a moving target. Surely, in 2024, wider society is more tolerant of eccentrics, but there are limits, and the truth isn't quite enough to set you free. With respect to identity, though, the social dimension is much more prominent. In fact, I would say it's dominant. How is that relevant to Goreans? Consider your identity. There are certain qualitative facts about your physical body. You are this many inches tall, weigh this many stone, and were born on a specific date. Very few people are going to argue about those. However, are you tall or short? That depends largely on context. In Canada, a man who stands 5'10" is right in the middle of the pack. In the Netherlands, where the average man stands 6 feet tall, 5'10" might be considered short. In Laos, such a man might be considered quite tall. If on his dating profile, such a man states that he is tall, he's not lying, but Dutch women in particular are under no obligation to acknowledge his tallness. If he insisted that they acknowledge his tallness, and especially if he insisted that not doing so was rude, an affront, an insult, or even an act of violence against him, he would be trying to establish this aspect of his identity using only his assertion of his subjective experience of it, leaving no room for the other side of identity, the negotiated experience of the other people playing the game of life. Identity is negotiated. This is something that people understood from the dawn of humanity until about 5 minutes ago. If you wanted to claim an identity, you may choose from a menu of established identities, although most of which would be unavailable to you, or you could even carve out a new one of your own. But you had no right to demand that anyone else acknowledge your identity in any way. If people in wider society or some segment of it didn't recognize the identity you were trying to assert, that was your problem, not theirs. The classical process was a continuous refinement of mutual signaling. This misapprehension about identity brushes up against Goreans on a few fronts. One of them is, I believe, merely a consequence of people spending too much time online and in their own heads, and the other is caused by the above, but it is toxically combined with an overall victimhood culture and the dilution of sex roles, and worst of all, the attempt by advocates to institutionalize, mandate, and oblige people to accept asserted identities regardless of what their lying eyes tell them. The first one is easier to deal with, and is common to many subcultures. People try to assert an identity they don't themselves possess. I'm not talking about people engaging in role-play roles that they don't actually hold in real life. In some virtual world, do whatever you want. I'm referring to the practice that men have of asserting an aspirational aspect of their personhood as if it were actual. I'll firstly say that I think it's quite beautiful and good that Kajira by default address men as master, but there is a real problem of males getting a little high on their own supply and using that term to describe themselves when they offer no evidence that they are a master of anything or of anyone. Have you mastered a useful skill, like a master machinist, plumber, or carpenter? Are you in charge of watercraft, master of a ship? Have you earned an academic degree that starts with the letter M? Do you train some beast or other? Do you actually keep slaves? Have you mastered some art? If you merely identify as a master, then I identify as a skeptic. Show me, don't tell me. Fortunately, annoying as this is, it doesn't really impinge on a Gorean community beyond the above-mentioned deference by default that Kajira will beautifully continue, and the occasional imposture. Faking it until one makes it is really a part of any young man's playbook by necessity, so a little of this must be forgiven. There are other cases of identity assertion that are more numerous, especially on the websites that Goreans tend to congregate on, as these websites frequently also cater to BDSM communities and are generally quite inclusive of diverse sexual identities in the GLBT, WKRP, and Cincinnati variety. One type of case that is becoming much more frequent and seems to me to take quite a bit of the gin out of the Gorean martini. I'm talking about people who don't want to identify with the sex they were born as. Gore strikes me as a philosophy in which one cultivates excellence and beauty within the bodily vessel one is endowed with. Of course, that's easy for me to say. I'm healthy, much of which is luck. So it's a little like the USA saying that instead of settling conflicts by military might, we'll do the civilized thing and play a basketball game. How convenient for them that they happen to also have the best basketball players. So I can appreciate it if my interpretation of Gore sounds like a justification for my own preferences or bigotry. You know what, though? I'm okay with that. You may choose to grant me the benefit of the doubt that I've reasoned my way to preferring to interact with biological females and biological males through the most rigorous possible of investigations, or you may choose to regard this tendency, which I share with many Gorean men, as a mere codification of bigotry, an unscientific, just so story. I don't know precisely which it is, but I'm as certain as I can be that you do not know either. That certain individuals, for me, fall into the same uncanny valley as killer clowns, zombies, and child molesters is as involuntary for me as my attraction to beautiful women, my instinct to protect my children, and my fear of venomous snakes. Is this right or wrong? If you, dear listener, are on the other side of this argument, or even on the other side of this identity, I mean you no harm, but I do propose that we not judge each other too harshly. I cannot imagine what it would be like to have a crisis of identity that strong. My instincts, biology, and desires have all pretty much pulled me in the same direction since I was a child. I do propose instead that we let our descendants be the judges. Perhaps they will come to regard me as I do the men who posted "no colored" signs in the windows of their cafes. Perhaps they will come to regard you as we today regard some barbaric tribe of nihilists who practiced child sacrifice, self-mutilation, cannibalism, and filed their teeth down to sharp points. instincts, and disgust reactions are imperfect guides as to what is precisely true or timelessly moral, but they serve well enough to light the way to what is beautiful, and life is long enough if lived beautifully. I can't speak for all Goreans as to whether this type of exclusivity is more Gorean than, say, a big tent ecumenical approach. I can say for certain that it would be most un-Gorean of me to apologize for it. As I've gone through today with Younger, Donovan, Ferris, Molyneux, and Peterson as my guides to the notions of tribe, genuine communications, and an integrated identity and reality, I'd like to think that I've laid out a simple enough idea. But I'll sort of summarize it in the following 6 lines. We belong in tribes. In our day-to-day, it is the people closest to us that affect us, upon which we may have the greatest impact. Our ancestors lived as if the rest of the world didn't exist, and that has its upsides. I happen to like the aesthetics of a Gorean tribe. We are at a point in human history where we're lucky enough to ask to join any tribe. No tribe is under any obligation to admit anyone, and not every tribe is for every person. There are plenty of people who aren't in my tribe. I wish them well all the same. Thanks for listening. Check back in next week. We'll be going into Gorean community. There's good, bad, and ugly, and we'll touch on all 3. So long, and be well.